Here's an article coming out of Yahoo News. Of course, I'm not a big fan of Yahoo News, nor am I a big fan of the person that is bringing this news. But here's the article. It says that Dr. Fauci warns of COVID-19 Delta variant now spreading rapidly in UK. We cannot let that happen in the United States. Now, like you, I've been reading the news and how that Dr. Fauci has basically covered up vital information and went to bat for the WHO and also for China. And certainly he is in the back pocket of China, just like the president, Joe Biden, is, and his son. But the information in this article still is biblical, and let me tell you the reason why. Because in Matthew 24, it states that in the last days, when Israel becomes a nation again, that the last generation, just before the tribulation period begins, and before that will be the rapture of the church, that there would be a number of signs that would come upon the earth, one being pestilence. And just when it looks like we are getting over this COVID-19 worldwide pandemic, a variant has popped up that started in India and has spread now to the UK. It not only is it as powerful as the original COVID-19, but it's 40% more powerful. And reading from the article, it says the potent variant known as Delta or B.1.617 emerged in India during that country's recent coronavirus surge. According to British Health Secretary Matt Hancock, it is about or around 40% more transmittable than the original strain or wild type that first appeared in 2019. Now, here's the scary part of this. This is while several coronavirus variants have appeared since the start of the pandemic, epidemiologists worried that mutation could create a strain that evades vaccines, which means that they're really worried that this strain could be immune to all vaccines that would be created. Now, right now here in the United States, there's only about 6% of the cases in the United States that the Delta variant accounts for. But they're indicating that if we don't get a handle on it right now, that could change rapidly. The good news here in the United States is that we have primarily used the Moderna vaccine, and if you have both your shots, you have a much higher probability of not getting this new variant than the other vaccines that are available. Now, of course, this is where Israel may play a part. They still haven't brought forth their vaccine yet. And frankly, I do look for them to bring their vaccine to market in the near future. It might be somewhere around September or whatever the case may be, but they again may be the saving grace for the world. And speaking of saving grace, Israel has just invented a needleless way to take blood samples. They use, in fact, what they do is they scan your eye, and through that they can test your blood. Meaning that in the future, you will not be, you don't have to go to a lab and get your blood drawn. And yes, Israel is the inventor of this new technology. And if you're interested in looking further into this article, just look for an article in under my news on my website. It's from the Times of Israel. That the article title is "Invented in Israel: No Needle Blood Tests Will Blast Off for Testing in Space." And the subheading on that is "Handheld Device Gathers Data by Scanning Blood Vessels in Eye, Sends Results Directly to Doctors, is due to leave Earth for International Space Station in October." And you know, the good thing is that you're going to be able to do this at home. You don't have to go to a lab. You won't have to go to your doctor. So this is a very exciting medical invention that will change the world in a very rapid time. And here's a study that kind of blows a hole in the whole China wet market pandemic spreading theory. An Oxford study reports no bats or pangolins were sold in the Wuhan wet market. But you know, it's kind of funny that they would try to pin the start of this worldwide pandemic on a wet market in the same town where they're experimenting with COVID-19 type viruses. It simply didn't make any sense, and now this pretty well seals their fate that we know the truth. But frankly, common sense indicated that to begin with. But just let me put a cap on this story with what the Bible does say. The Bible says that during the last days that this would be a sign that there would be pestilence that would arise. It didn't matter if they were natural or whether they were man-made, they're gonna arise. and they would continue to rise. Now, the bottom line is that this is a sign. And basically, it's a sign to let you know, if you're listening, if you're watching, that the tribulation period is not far away. And that so much more, the rapture of the church is not that far away. And I really expect to see more earthquakes to start popping up in more frequency and intensity, along with famines and other things that will give us signs that this period is about ready to end the church age, and they were about ready to enter into a new age known as the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation period. But again, that these should be taken as signs that we are in the last days. So frankly, I don't think I would really take a sigh of relief that we're probably in the last throes of this COVID-19 pandemic, because something else is going to pop up, and this looks like that possibly may be it. And then when that's over, something else is probably going to pop up as well. And as I said, then you should start looking for more earthquakes to take place and for famine to be a noticeable problem. And of course, another big one is wars and rumors of wars. I would still keep an eye on what's happening over in the Far East, which is China. I believe that they're going to test the new president and to see if he is going to go to war if, in fact, Taiwan is taken over. And if that doesn't happen, I can almost believe that that's probably going to bring about the Gog and Magog war in the near future. Because that's really the picture that is described in the Bible, that when Russia, Iran, and Turkey come down upon Israel, that most of the world will sit back and watch and ask questions but not do anything about it. And as I said, that's probably the first test that will be given will probably be Taiwan with China, and then don't forget about Ukraine. That probably will be another test. And then I can probably see another one coming about, possibly with North Korea and South Korea. And again, this would be under the heading of wars and rumors of wars. Now, changing directions, here's an article that I think is very important that could ultimately lead to peace in the Middle East. And here it is right here. It's coming out of the Jerusalem Post. It says, is Egypt planning to retake control of the Gaza Strip? And you may not know this, but Egypt once controlled the Gaza Strip. In fact, they controlled it from 1948 to 1967. But since then, they pretty much turned it over to Israel to deal with. And, of course, back in 2005, Israel gave back the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians. Of course, that was a horrible decision, but they thought they would be able to do a land for peace transition, and it simply never happened. But reading from the article, it says the Egyptian decision to send building equipment and engineers to the Gaza Strip came within the context of Cairo's pledge to contribute to reconstruction efforts there after the recent fighting between Israel and Hamas. And in that, the Egyptians have pledged $500 million to help rebuild the houses and buildings that were destroyed during the fighting. And because that they have made this big investment and they're bringing in supplies and committing themselves to this reconstruction, it's being speculated that they are there to stay. Now, how much of a presence they will be is unknown right now, but the theory is that as long as Egypt is in the Gaza Strip, Hamas will not attack Israel. And reading from the article, it says it will be hard for Hamas to initiate another round of fighting with Israel when there are many Egyptians inside the Gaza Strip, one of the sources said. If Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad start firing rockets at Israel while the Egyptian construction teams are working in the Gaza Strip, the two groups will get into trouble with Egypt. According to the sources, the Egyptians have been warned against initiating another round of fighting while Cairo pursues its efforts to help rebuild the Gaza Strip. And here's an interesting part of this article. It says, there are many rumors that the Egyptians are planning to return to the Gaza Strip, said a veteran Palestinian journalist in the Hamas-ruled coastal enclave. Many people here are convinced that the Egyptian-sponsored reconstruction work is part of a plan to pave the way for a permanent Egyptian security presence in the Gaza Strip. And here's another telltale sign that you might want to take note of. It says the head of Egypt's General Intelligence Service, Abbas Kamel, last week made a rare visit to the Gaza Strip, where he met with leaders of Hamas and other Palestinian factions and discussed with them ways of maintaining the ceasefire and the reconstruction efforts. This meeting, they say, is a big indicator that Egypt plans on having a permanent residence in the Gaza Strip. Now, the article goes on to say that Egypt has no desire to go back and rule the Gaza Strip, but they're definitely going to play a big part. And to me, this appears to be a way to actually pave the way to a peace process that could eventually be a part of the peace with many. You know, the problem in the past has always been, well, of course, Hamas was always going to be a thorn in Israel's flesh. And if the Egyptians can keep Hamas and the other Islamic factions at bay, this peace process may be able to go forward. And of course, that also goes for Iran keeping Hezbollah in check in the northern part of Israel. And of course, that's where China and Russia come in. You know, I read an article just a couple of days ago that said that very well may be the case. And if you only want to look further into that, that's an article coming out of the Jerusalem Post. But certainly something's going to have to happen because U.S. Secretary of State Blinken said that at the present rate, Iran could be at a nuclear breakout point within weeks. So something's going to have to happen in the very near future, or we're either going to have war. We're going to have war. We're going to have peace in the very near future. So, you know, I have to say that we very well may be living in the day of which we can see the day coming. And I've always taught that. I've always believed that. And Hebrews 10:25 still means what it says. And that day is today that I believe that we're looking at the days coming. And here's an article that comes out of the Times of Israel that really could play into what Daniel 9:27 says, that this 7-year peace that's coming is going to be built upon a plan that previously was in place, but many believe that it will be made stronger by the Antichrist, or at least the Antichrist will be involved. And this article comes out of the Times of Israel, and it says that Biden administration laying groundwork for a push to expand Abraham Accords. And here's the funny thing, what it says about the subheading. It says, rare carryover policy from previous White House faces hurdles as recent Gaza fighting strengthens conviction of opponents. And reading from the article, the first paragraph, it says that the Biden administration is laying the groundwork for a renewed push to encourage more Arab countries to sign accords with Israel and working to strengthen existing deals after last month's devastating war in the Gaza Strip interrupted those diplomatic efforts. The embrace of the so-called Abraham Accords is a rare carryover of a signature Trump administration policy by President Joe Biden and other Democrats. The Abraham Accords include a general declaration of support for peaceful relations in the Middle East among Jews, Muslims, and Christians, all followers of religions linked to the patriarch Abraham. The Trump administration saw the accords partly as paving a path toward full ties with Israel, including in security and intelligence cooperation to counter common rivals such as Iran. But you should also know that many of these Arab countries are now seeing the handwriting on the wall that there probably will be an agreement between the U.S. and Iran. So they're beginning to warm up to Iran, and that very well may bring in Iran into this big peace with many. And at the same time, China is also putting pressure on Iran to settle down and to stop aggravating the Middle East. But on top of that as well, French President Emmanuel Macron says he wants to play a major part in achieving a two-state solution. And here's what the article says. As French President Emmanuel Macron, in a historic address to the American Jewish Committee, on Wednesday reaffirmed his commitments to combat anti-Semitism, strengthen France's relations with Israel and the United States, and ensure that Iran's ballistic missile and regional activities are addressed in any agreement. And, you know, that's exactly what's going to have to happen in order for this agreement to be a success. Iran is going to have to be kept in check, and it'll have to be a part of some type of agreement. But many of the pieces seem to be being put in place, and there is a sense of urgency that Iran needs to be put in check if, in fact, a successful deal, which is described in the Bible, is to come to pass. So this is definitely something I would keep in mind and keep watching. And certainly if you don't know the Lord, today is the day of salvation. You simply don't know when you're going to die. In fact, I just heard that a friend of mine who I played different sports with, suddenly died of a heart attack, and that was simply it. And the bad part is that once you die, either you know the Lord or you don't. And if you don't know the Lord, there's no amount of good works that you've ever done that's going to get you into heaven. That's why Jesus died for the sins of the world, but you still have to accept him as your Lord and Savior. And right now, I would encourage you to do that. And you that are Christians, you need a copy of my Tribulation Period Survival Guide. Go down to the description of this video, click on the link to my website, go to where you can purchase this paperback book, get it to your friends, your lost loved ones, and make sure they have this information in their hands once the tribulation period begins. You certainly don't want the world to tell them how they need to react once the tribulation period begins, because they're going to tell them to worship the Antichrist and to take his mark. So I hope you will go down and get this book. Well, this is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.